The rain tastes like metal when you're lying on wet pavement. I hadn't meant to notice, hadn't meant to be conscious at all. But there I was, cheek pressed against cold concrete that smelled of motor oil and city grime, rain pooling in the shell of my ear, and all I could think was how the water tasted wrong. Pennies and rust. Blood, probably. Mine. My fingers twitched. They shouldn't have. The pain in my chest suggested something vital had stopped working, but my hand scraped against the ground anyway, nail catching in a crack, and that tiny sensation, rough stone under a broken nail, felt enormous. Real. The last real thing. Footsteps. The click of heels, sharp and quick, growing distant. Just leave her. Ambulance takes too long anyway. The apartment papers are signed. Oh, that's what matters. The voices faded into the white noise of traffic, and I was alone with the rain and the taste of metal and a truth that sat in my chest heavier than the truck that had hit me. My sister hadn't even looked back. The world tilted, grayed, sound became texture, light became sensation, and everything compressed into a single point of cold clarity. This was it. This was how it ended. 32 years old, no savings, no apartment, no anything, bleeding out on 7th Avenue because I'd been too stupid to see them coming. The cold spread from my extremities inward. I couldn't feel my feet anymore, couldn't feel the rain. Just that persistent taste of copper and the absurd observation that the streetlight above me had a broken panel hanging by wires, swaying in the wind like darkness. Then the smell of jasmine tea. I jerked upright, gasping, hands clutching at fabric that wasn't wet, wasn't torn, wasn't soaked with rain and blood. Cotton, soft. The duvet from, no, I couldn't breathe. My chest heaved, pulling in air that smelled wrong. Not like exhaust and rain, but like the lavender sachets that Mrs. Chen from 4B always tucked into the hallway corners. Like the cheap vanilla candles my mother used to buy from the dollar store. Like home, except home hadn't smelled like this in years, not since... My hands were shaking. I looked at them in the thin morning light filtering through curtains I recognized but shouldn't. And they were wrong. Smooth. No scar on the left thumb from the kitchen knife incident last year. No calluses from the extra shifts at the warehouse. The skin was younger, softer, the nails unbroken and neat. This wasn't possible. I stumbled out of bed, a bed I hadn't slept in for 7 years, and my feet hit carpet that had been replaced with laminate in 2019. The room swam. Walls painted the pale yellow I'd chosen when I first moved in, not the beige my mother had insisted on later. Posters still tacked up, the Art Deco prints I'd bought at that street fair, the ones I'd taken down after Melissa said they were juvenile. My breath came in short gasps. The mirror? I needed the bathroom. I practically ran, feet remembering the path even as my mind screamed that this couldn't be real. The door stuck slightly the way it always had before Dad fixed it. And then I was staring at a face I hadn't seen in years. 25. I was 25 years old. The face in the mirror was smooth, unlined, still holding the remnants of baby fat I'd lost during the lean years. My hair was longer, darker, not yet showing the premature gray that stress had brought on. No circles under the eyes from double shifts. No tightness around the mouth from biting back words I couldn't afford to say. I gripped the edge of the sink, and it was cold and real and here, and I couldn't reconcile the feeling of porcelain under my palms with the memory of pavement under my cheek. Dead. I had been dead. The truck, the rain, the taste of metal, Melissa's heels clicking away. A door slammed somewhere in the apartment. "Morning, sweetie. You up?" My mother's voice, bright and cheerful in the way it hadn't been since before Dad's diagnosis, before the medical bills, before everything fell apart. I couldn't move, couldn't answer. My mother had been dead for 3 years in the timeline I remembered. Heart attack, sudden, devastating. Tia, Melissa had cried at the funeral with her face in her husband's shoulder, while I'd stood there dry-eyed and numb, already knowing that I'd be paying off Mom's credit card debt for years. "Ava, you okay in there?" The doorknob rattled. I stared at it, at the brass handle that was still shiny and new, not yet tarnished by time and use. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror, young and terrified. "Fine," my voice cracked. "Just getting ready." "Well, hurry up. Your father made pancakes, the blueberry ones you like." Footsteps retreated. I pressed my forehead against the mirror, feeling the cool glass against my skin, and tried to breathe, tried to think. This was impossible. People didn't just wake up 7 years in the past, didn't get second chances, didn't... But the apartment was real. The face in the mirror was real. And if this was real, if somehow I'd been given this impossible gift, then I could stop them. The thought hit like a physical blow. I could stop all of it. The manipulation, the guilt trips, the slow erosion of boundaries, until I had nothing left. The apartment. God, the apartment. This apartment, the one I was standing in. The one I'd saved for years to buy. The one I'd signed over to Melissa because she was pregnant and needed space. And Mom had looked at me with those pleading eyes and said, "Family takes care of family, Ava." The apartment I'd signed away 8 months from now. My hands tightened on the sink. No, not this time. This time I would... What? What could I do? I was 25 with a receptionist's salary and student loans. I couldn't fight them. Couldn't just refuse when my pregnant sister needed help. Couldn't withstand the weight of family obligation that would crush me just as thoroughly as it had before. Unless... The thought crystallized slowly, piece by piece. Unless I didn't wait. Unless I didn't let myself become the person who could be guilted into giving up everything. Unless I changed the entire game. A memory surfaced. Marcus Chen from the coffee shop on 5th. The real estate developer who'd bought the building 3 years into my first timeline. Who'd renovated, flipped, made millions. Who'd offered to buy my apartment too. But I'd already signed it over to Melissa by then. And she'd sold it for twice what it was worth and never shared a penny. Marcus Chen, who right now in 2018 was just starting out. Who didn't own this building yet. The building. I straightened slowly, mind racing. The building had gone on sale. When? I racked my memory, pulling up details from a past that hadn't happened yet. Mrs. Yamamoto on the 6th floor had mentioned it. Said the old owner was retiring, moving to Florida. It had been June. Late June. Just a few months from now. And I knew things. Knew which units would become rent-controlled nightmares. Knew which tenants would skip out on leases. Knew that the building's value would skyrocket once the new development went in across the street. Knew everything that Marcus Chen had known when he'd bought it and turned it into a gold mine. Ava, pancakes are getting cold. Coming. I looked at my reflection one more time. Young. Naive. The girl who'd believed that family meant loyalty instead of parasitism. Who'd thought that being kind meant being endlessly giving. Who died alone on a rainy street because the people she'd sacrificed everything for couldn't be bothered to call an ambulance. Not anymore. I squared my shoulders and opened the door. The apartment smelled like butter and maple syrup. My father stood at the stove, humming off key, wearing the ridiculous kiss the cook apron that Melissa had given him for Father's Day. He turned when I entered, and the smile that spread across his face was so familiar, so whole, that I had to grab the doorframe. He didn't know yet. Didn't know that the cancer was already growing, silent and patient, waiting to announce itself in 8 months with a stage 4 diagnosis. Didn't know that the medical bills would drain their retirement savings, their emergency fund, everything they'd built. I didn't know that his death would be the beginning of my family's complete moral collapse. There she is! He flipped a pancake with a flourish. Thought you might sleep through breakfast. Late night? I'd worked a double shift. My memory supplied. Covering for Janet so she could go to her kid's recital. I'd come home exhausted, eaten leftover pizza, and fallen into bed without even changing clothes. That had been, God, 7 years ago. 7 years from now. Last night and a lifetime away. Just tired, I managed. Well, sit, eat. Your mother's been going on about that new diet again, but I snuck in extra butter. He winked and something in my chest cracked. I sat at the small kitchen table, in the chair that had always been mine, and watched my father pile pancakes onto a plate. His hands were steady, strong. So not yet shaking from the chemo, not yet thin and spotted with bruises from failed IV insertions. Just Dad making breakfast, humming his tuneless song. "Where's Melissa?" I asked, and my voice sounded almost normal. Still in bed, I imagine. Mom bustled in from the bedroom, already dressed in her work clothes, the navy pantsuit she'd worn to the bank every day for 20 years. You know your sister never was a morning person. Melissa, who was 28 in this timeline, married to Derek for 6 months, living in a cramped studio in Queens, and already pregnant, though she wouldn't announce it for another 3 weeks. Melissa, who'd come crying to me about needing space, needing help, needing my apartment. My beautiful, renovated, mortgage-paid apartment that I'd worked 3 jobs to afford. Melissa, was currently asleep in her childhood bedroom, which I'd insisted they keep made up because families should always have a place to come home to. The irony was so sharp I almost laughed. "She's going through something," Mom said, pouring coffee. "Marriage is hard at the beginning. She needs support." 7 years ago, I'd nodded. Agreed. Been the good big sister. This time, I just ate my pancakes and said nothing. Mom frowned. "Ava, did you hear me?" "I heard you." "Well," she sat down across from me, cradling her mug. "Don't you think we should be there for her?" And here it was, the first test, the first moment where the old Ava would have folded, would have said of course, would have started the long slide toward martyrdom. I could feel the words trying to form, the old patterns reasserting themselves like muscle memory. I took a sip of coffee instead. It was too hot, burned my tongue, and the sharp pain was grounding. Real. "She's an adult," I said finally. "She can handle her own marriage." The silence was immediate and profound. Dad stopped humming. Mom's coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. They stared at me like I'd started speaking Mandarin. "That's a bit harsh," Mom said carefully. "Is it?" I met her eyes. "She's 28, Mom. Married. Has a job. She doesn't need us to manage her life. Family supports each other. Family also respects boundaries." The words hung in the air. I watched my mother's face cycle through confusion, hurt, disapproval. Watched my father shift uncomfortably, clearly wanting to stay out of it. This was new. The old Ava never talked back, never set limits, never did anything but accommodate and apologize and give. "Nah, I don't know what's gotten into you," Mom said finally, voice tight. "But that attitude is mine," I said quietly. "My attitude, my boundaries, my life. I love Melissa, but I'm not responsible for her happiness." I stood, taking my plate to the sink. My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline and fear and something that might have been exhilaration mixing in my bloodstream. Behind me, the silence was thick enough to cut. "I have to get ready for work," I said, not turning around. "Thanks for breakfast, Dad. It was perfect." I left them there, stunned and speechless, and walked back to my room on legs that felt simultaneously weak and strong. The door clicked shut behind me, and I leaned against it, heart hammering. First boundary, set. And I'd survived it. Work was surreal. I walked into the office building on Madison Avenue and was hit by a wave of sensory memory so strong I nearly stumbled. The lobby hadn't been renovated yet. It still had the green marble floors instead of the gray tile, the old elevators with the brass fixtures instead of the sleek modern ones. Even the security guard was different, old Frank, who'd retired in 2020, sitting at the desk doing a crossword. "Morning, Ava," he called, not even looking up. "Morning, Frank." The elevator smelled like someone's perfume, floral and too sweet. I rode it to the 14th floor, watching the numbers light up one by one, and tried to prepare myself for what came next. Henderson and Associates, the law firm where I'd worked as a receptionist for 3 years before getting laid off in the 2019 restructuring. Where I'd answered phones and filed papers and smiled at clients and never ever complained because I needed the health insurance and the steady paycheck. Where I now remembered with crystal clarity, watched the senior partners make terrible decisions that would lead to that restructuring. Decisions I'd known were wrong, but had never questioned because I was just the receptionist. And who was I to comment on legal strategy? The glass doors swung open. The reception desk was sleek and modern, and I'd sat behind it for 3 years, invisible and efficient. Sarah from accounting was already at the coffee machine, and she waved when she saw me. "Thank God you're here. Mr. Henderson's been asking for the Carlson files, and I have no idea where they are." The Carlson files. And I knew exactly where they were, misfiled under Carlisle because the temp they'd hired last week couldn't spell. I'd found them eventually, but not before Mr. Henderson had spent an hour shouting. "Check the C's under Carlisle," I said, hanging up my coat. "Common mistake." Sarah blinked. "How did you?" "Lucky guess." I slid into my chair, logged into the computer, and stared at the screen. July 15th, 2018. A Monday. I'd worked this day before, remembered it vaguely as unremarkable. Phones, files, lunch at my desk. Nothing special, nothing important, except now I knew what came next. knew every mistake the firm would make, knew which clients would sue, which cases would fall apart, which investments would fail. Information that was useless to me as a receptionist, but that could be worth everything if I played it right. The phone rang. I answered it automatically, professional smile in my voice, even though no one could see me. Henderson and Associates, how may I direct your call? Ava, it's Mom. I closed my eyes. Of course it was. I'm at work, Mom. Can this wait? No, it cannot. Her voice was crisp, clipped with disapproval. I don't know what's wrong with you this morning, but you owe your sister an apology. For what? For being rude about her marriage, I have to go. A call's coming in. Ava Chen, don't you dare... I hung up, set the phone down gently, precisely, and watched my hand shake against the receiver. 3 deep breaths. 4, 5. The old guilt rose like bile, the instinct to call back, to apologize, to smooth things over. I didn't pick up the phone. It rang again 30 seconds later. I let it go to voicemail. A text message buzzed on my cell. Then another. I turned the phone face down without reading them and went back to work. By lunch, I had 15 missed calls and 37 text messages. I deleted them all without reading a single one. The coffee shop on 5th was exactly as I remembered it, cramped and warm, smelling of espresso and cinnamon. I ordered my usual latte and found a table by the window, watching the summer crowd rush past. Tourists and business people and college students, all wrapped up in their own lives, their own problems, completely unaware that I was sitting here 7 years out of time and planning something impossible. Ava? Ava Chen? I looked up. Marcus Chen stood there with his own coffee, surprise written across his face. He looked younger than I remembered, less polished, his suit a bit cheaper, and his haircut less stylish. But it was definitely him. The man who would buy this building, renovate it, make his fortune. The man who, right now, was just a struggling developer trying to catch his first big break. Marcus, I said, smiling. Hi, please sit. He sat, still looking surprised. I didn't know you came here. I mean, I've seen you around the building, but I needed to get out of the office. I wrapped my hands around my cup. You live in the building, right? Unit 512? Yeah, for now, he grimaced. Lease is up in a few months. Probably have to move somewhere cheaper. This was it. The opening. In my first timeline, I'd never really talked to Marcus beyond polite hallway conversations. Never knew his story. Never knew that he was drowning in business school debt and failed ventures, desperately looking for the one deal that would change everything. Never knew that he found it by buying our building. Business not going well? I asked sympathetically. He laughed, bitter. Is it that obvious? Yeah, it's rough. I've got a vision, you know. I see potential in these old buildings, the ones everyone else writes off, but getting the capital together, convincing investors, he shook his head. Feels impossible some days. What kind of buildings are you looking at? Older residential complexes mostly, the kind that need work but have good bones. Problem is, everyone wants the flashy new developments. No one sees the value in renovation until someone like me does it first and proves the market. He took a sip of coffee. Sorry, you probably don't want to hear about my problems. Actually, I said slowly, I'm interested. I've been thinking about investing. That got his attention. You? I mean, he caught himself. Sorry, that sounded like I'm just a receptionist with no money? I smiled. Fair assumption, but I have savings. Not a lot, but some. And I'm looking for something smart to do with it. This was a lie. I had maybe $5,000 in my savings account, but I also knew things, and knowledge was worth more than money if you used it right. Marcus leaned forward. What kind of investment are you thinking? Real estate. Specifically, residential buildings in this area. There's a development going in across the street from our building. Did you know that? He blinked. No. Are you sure? Positive. City Planning Board approved it last month. High-end retail and condos. It'll break ground in the fall. This was information I'd learned later, casually, from Mrs. Yamamoto, who'd complained about the noise. So, information that Marcus wouldn't discover for another 6 months, by which time he'd already bought the building and started renovations. Property values around here are going to jump. I watched him process this, saw the exact moment the gears started turning in his head, saw the hunger, the calculation, the desperate hope of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this kind of tip. How do you know this? He asked. I pay attention. I shrugged. Look, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just saying, if someone were to buy a building in this area right now, before that development becomes common knowledge, they could make serious money. Someone like me. Someone like you. He sat back, studying me. Why are you telling me this? Good question, one I'd prepared an answer for. Because I want in, I said simply. If you find a building worth buying, I want to invest. Not much. Like I said, I don't have much, but enough to get a small piece of the deal. You get the capital you need. I get a return on my investment. We both win. He paused. That's not how it usually works. Investors want big stakes. Control. I don't want control. I want money. And I trust you to make it. I leaned forward. Look, I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life. I've watched developers come and go. Most of them are idiots who bulldoze history and build glass boxes. But you actually care about the buildings, about renovating instead of destroying. That's worth betting on. It was true, too. In my first timeline, Marcus had turned our building into something beautiful while keeping its character. Dua had worked with long-term tenants instead of evicting them, had made a fortune, yes, but had also created something worthwhile, until Melissa had sold my apartment out from under his renovation plan and complicated everything. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his coffee growing cold between his hands. Finally, he said, "There is a building. Owners looking to sell, retirement. It's older, needs work, but the structure is solid. Problem is, I can't quite get the down payment together, and the banks won't loan me the rest without more collateral." "Which building? You're living in it?" My heart skipped a beat. "Our building, 847 Fifth Avenue. Yeah, old man Petrov wants to retire to Florida, and his kids don't want to manage the property. He's asking a fair price, but it's still more than I can manage." He rubbed his face. I've been trying to put together investor interest, but in this market, with my track record..." "How much do you need?" He named a figure. It was large, but not impossible. Not if I was smart. Not if I leveraged everything I had and everything I knew. "I can help," I said. He laughed. "Ava, no offense, but unless you have a rich uncle somewhere, I don't. But I have information. Contacts. I know who the problem tenants are, which units need the most work, where the hidden costs are. I know this building inside and out." I met his eyes. "And I know it's worth triple what Petrov's asking once that development goes in. Maybe more." "You seem very certain." "I am." We stared at each other across the small table, the coffee shop noise fading into background static. This was insane. I was a receptionist with minimal savings, trying to convince a struggling developer to let me in on a deal that hadn't even been made yet. On paper, it was ridiculous, but I had something Marcus didn't. Certainty. Knowledge. The absolute conviction that came from having already lived this future once. "Let me think about it," he said finally. "Talk to some people. But Ava," he hesitated, "if you're serious about this, you should know it's risky. Real estate development isn't a sure thing. We could lose everything." In my first timeline, he'd made millions. Millions. But I couldn't tell him that. "I know," I said instead, "but some risks are worth taking." He nodded slowly, still studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "I'll call you. This week, I promise. I'll be waiting." We parted ways outside the coffee shop, and I watched him walk away, phone already out, probably calling his business partner or his bank or whoever he needed to make this happen. The summer sun was hot on my shoulders, and the city smelled like hot garbage and opportunity. I'd just made my first move. Now I had to make sure I could back it up. My apartment felt different when I got home that evening. Smaller, maybe, or just more precious now that I knew what came next. Every detail was familiar yet strange. The crack in the ceiling I'd always meant to fix, the view of the street below, the sound of Mrs. Yamamoto's TV through the wall. This place had been my sanctuary. My achievement. I'd bought it at 23 with money I'd saved from my first real job, a tiny one-bedroom in a decent neighborhood that I'd slowly made beautiful. Painted the walls myself. Refinished the floors, installed the shelving units. Every inch of it earned. And in 7 months, I would sign it away. Unless I didn't. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the couch, pulling my laptop onto my knees. Time to research. Time to plan. I had knowledge, but I needed specifics. Numbers. Documentation. Everything I could find about the building, the neighborhood, the development project across the street. 3 hours later, I had a spreadsheet and a headache, and the beginnings of a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. The building was currently owned by Dmitry Petrov, age 73, who'd bought it in 1985 as a young immigrant and turned it into his retirement fund. 40 units across 8 floors, mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms, mostly rent-stabilized but with a few market-rate units that brought in higher income. The building was old but structurally sound. Pre-war construction, solid brick, the kind that lasted forever if you maintained it, which Petrov had mostly, but at 73 and wanting to move to Miami, he was ready to sell. In my first timeline, he'd sold to Marcus in September 2018 for $8.2 million. Marcus had then spent another $3 million on renovations over 2 years, turning it into a showcase property worth at least $20 million by 2021. That was the information I knew. What I needed now was to figure out how to get myself into that deal. I didn't have $8.2 million. I didn't even have $82,000 in liquid assets. What I had was $5,000 in savings, a stable job, decent credit, and the knowledge of what this building would become. And I had one more thing. I knew exactly when Melissa would come asking for the apartment. October. She'd announce her pregnancy in August, start showing in September, and by October, she'd be at my door crying about space and need and family obligation. And I'd cave. I'd sign the quit-claim deed. I'd give her everything. The apartment was worth about $180,000 in the current market. Not enough to buy the building, but enough to make a serious down payment if I could somehow use it as leverage before Melissa got her claws in it. I stared at my spreadsheet, numbers blurring together. There had to be a way. Some angle I wasn't seeing, My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Talk to my partner. We're interested? Meet tomorrow? I'll bring numbers. I smiled and typed back, name the time and place. We met at his office, which was really just a corner of his studio apartment converted into a workspace. Papers everywhere. See architectural drawings tacked to the walls, a coffee maker that looked like it had been running continuously for days. His business partner was there too, a woman named Linda Vasquez with sharp eyes and a sharper handshake. "So you're the miracle investor Marcus told me about?" she said, not quite managing to keep the skepticism out of her voice. "I'm not a miracle, just someone who knows a good opportunity." "Uh-huh." She sat behind the desk, Marcus taking the chair next to her, leaving me standing in front of them like I was being interviewed, which I supposed I was. "Marcus says you have inside information about the building." "I live there. I know the tenants, the problems, the hidden costs. I know Mrs. Yamamoto in 6B has been rent stabilized for 30 years and won't leave without a fight. I know the Rodriguez family in 3A are always late on rent. I know the plumbing in the East Wing needs replacement, and the electrical in units 2F and 4C isn't up to code." I paused. "I also know that development across the street is going to break ground in September, and that property values in this area are going to spike by at least 30% in the next 2 years. Linda and Marcus exchanged a look. "How do you know about the development?" Linda asked. "Public records, city planning board meetings. You can look it up yourself. The permits were approved last month. Most people haven't noticed yet because it hasn't been announced publicly, but it will be. Soon." "And you think that makes this building worth buying?" "I think it makes this building worth buying at Petrov's asking price and worth at least triple that in 3 years. I think Marcus knows how to renovate without destroying the character of the place, and I think we could all make a lot of money if we move fast." Linda leaned back in her chair. "What kind of investment are we talking about? Marcus said you have limited funds." Here it was, the moment where I had to sell them on something I hadn't fully figured out myself. "I have $5,000 in liquid savings," I said, "plus an apartment in the building worth approximately $180,000 that I own outright. No mortgage. I propose using my apartment as collateral for a private loan that would contribute to the down payment. In exchange, I want a percentage stake in the building proportional to my investment, plus first right of refusal on any unit sales in the building." Linda's eyebrows rose. "Oh, you want to leverage your home?" "Yes." "That's risky?" "Everything worth doing is risky." "And what happens if this doesn't work out? If we can't get financing? If the renovation costs overrun? If the market doesn't spike like you think it will?" "Then I lose my apartment," I said simply, "but I don't think that's going to happen." Marcus spoke up for the first time. Ava, are you sure? I mean, this is your home. If something goes wrong, I'm sure. I was, because I knew this worked, knew Marcus succeeded, knew the only thing that had gone wrong in my first timeline was my own weakness, my own inability to protect what was mine. This time, I wasn't just protecting it, I was expanding it, taking what should have been stolen from me and turning it into something bigger. Linda was quiet for a long moment, studying some papers on her desk. We'd need to verify everything. The development permits, the building condition, the market analysis, and we'd need to structure this very carefully. A private loan using your apartment as collateral would require specific documentation, and I can handle the paperwork, I said. I work at a law firm. I know people. That wasn't entirely true. I was a receptionist, not a paralegal. But I knew where the forms were kept, and I was friendly with the junior associates who actually understood this stuff. I'd figure it out. Linda and Marcus exchanged another look, having one of those silent conversations that long-term business partners could have. Finally, Linda nodded. Okay, she said. We'll do due diligence on the development project and the building condition. If everything checks out, we'll draw up a preliminary partnership agreement. Marcus will meet with Petrov and see if we can lock in the price before word about the development spreads. And Ava, she fixed me with a hard stare. You need to talk to a lawyer about this. A real one, not your boss. Make sure you understand what you're risking. I understand. I don't think you do, she said, not unkindly, but it's your choice. We shook hands, and I left feeling like I'd just jumped off a cliff and was waiting to see if the parachute would open. My family exploded over dinner that night. I'd gone to their apartment, the 2-bedroom in Queens they'd lived in my whole childhood, for what Mom had called a family discussion, which really meant an ambush. Melissa was there, red-eyed and dramatic, curled into Derek's side on the couch. Mom sat in her chair with her arms crossed. Dad hovered nervously by the kitchen, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. You owe your sister an apology, Mom said the moment I walked in. No hello? No how are you? Straight to the attack. For what? I asked, setting down my purse. For what you said yesterday. About her marriage, about not supporting her. I said she was an adult who could handle her own life. That's not an insult, Mom. That's a fact. Melissa made a wounded sound. You don't understand what I'm going through. Derek and I are struggling, and you don't even care. I looked at her perfect makeup and designer handbag, and the wedding ring that cost more than my car. At Derek beside her, silent and useless as always. At my mother's expectant face and my father's uncomfortable shuffle. In my first timeline, I'd caved here, apologized. Spent 2 hours listening to Melissa cry about money and space and stress. Had been the good sister, the reliable daughter, the one who fixed everything. I care, I said quietly. I just don't think caring means fixing your problems for you. She's your sister, Mom's voice rose. Family helps each other. Family also respects boundaries. Family doesn't use guilt and manipulation to get what they want. Family doesn't... I can't believe you. Melissa was crying now, real tears streaming down her face. I need you, Ava. I need support, and you're being so cruel. What specifically do you need, Melissa? I kept my voice level. What help are you asking for? She blinked, thrown by the direct question. Support, understanding, someone to talk to. I can listen. I can't fix your marriage or your finances or your life choices. Those are yours to handle. But I'm pregnant. The room went silent. Oh, so we were doing this now? 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Melissa's hand went to her stomach, and she looked at me with those big, wounded eyes that had worked on me for 28 years. I'm pregnant, she repeated, softer. And I'm scared, and I need my family, and you're being so cold, Mom gasped. Dad made a small sound of surprise. Derek put his arm around Melissa tighter, and I stood there feeling like I was watching a play I'd already seen, because I had. This exact scene, 3 weeks from now in the original timeline. The announcement, the tears, the manipulation disguised as vulnerability, the beginning of the end. Congratulations, I said. Mom turned to stare at me. That's all you have to say. What do you want me to say? That you'll be there for her. That you'll help. That... I said congratulations. I'm happy for her. But being pregnant doesn't mean she needs me to manage her life. Melissa was sobbing now, face buried in Derek's shoulder. See? See what I mean? She doesn't care. She doesn't... I have to go, I said. Not because I couldn't handle this, but because staying would mean falling into old patterns, would mean apologizing, comforting, giving in. Melissa, I hope your pregnancy goes well. I really do. But I'm not going to be manipulated into feeling guilty for having boundaries. I picked up my purse and walked out. Behind me, my mother's voice rose in fury. Ava Chen, you get back here right now. I didn't. I walked down the hallway, took the elevator, crossed the street, and kept walking until I couldn't hear my mother's voice anymore. Until the only sound was my own breathing and the city around me and the pounding of my heart that felt like freedom and terror in equal measure. My phone started ringing before I made it to the subway. I declined the call. It rang again. Again. I turned it off. The partnership agreement arrived 3 days later. I read it at my desk during lunch, hidden behind my computer monitor, heart pounding with every page. The language was dense and legal and intimidating, but I'd spent 3 days talking to Tyler, one of the junior associates, and I understood the basics. Marcus and Linda would form an LLC to purchase the building. My $5,000 plus my apartment, valued at $180,000 and used as loan collateral, would constitute 2.2% equity in the deal. Small, but mine. The agreement included the first right of refusal clause I'd requested. If any unit went up for sale, I could buy it before it hit the market. There was risk. God, so much risk. If the deal fell through, if financing failed, if literally anything went wrong, I could lose everything. My apartment, my savings, my security, but I would lose it anyway, I reminded myself. In the original timeline, I'd lose it to Melissa in 7 months. At least this way, I had a chance to turn the loss into gain. I signed. Tyler notarized it for me, asking no questions beyond his professional curiosity about what I was getting into. I thanked him with coffee and a promise to explain later, then walked the documents to Marcus's office myself. "You're sure?" he asked one more time. "I'm sure." He nodded and signed his own copy, Linda adding her signature below his. Just like that, I was a real estate investor. A very small, very terrified real estate investor, but still. Petrov agreed to the price, Marcus said. "We close in 6 weeks if we can get financing lined up. I've got meetings with 3 banks this week, and Linda's working on private investors. This might actually happen." "It will happen," I said, because I knew it would. Knew Marcus would get the loan, would buy the building, would transform it. The only difference this time was that I'd be part of it instead of a victim of it. I walked home that evening feeling like I was floating 3 inches off the ground. The summer air was thick and humid, smelling of hot asphalt and food carts, and every detail felt sharp and significant. This was it. The beginning. The moment where everything changed. My phone buzzed. I turned it back on that morning after 3 days of silence, and the backlog of messages was staggering. 57 text messages, 23 missed calls, voicemails I hadn't listened to. All from my family, each message more frantic and guilt-laden than the last. I deleted them all and texted Marcus. "Deal's on. Don't fuck it up." His response came back immediately. "Wasn't planning to." Melissa showed up at my apartment the next Saturday. I heard her heels on the stairs. That distinctive click-clack that I remembered from the rain-soaked street, from my last moments in the old timeline. The sound made my stomach clench, but I opened the door anyway. She looked terrible. Hair unwashed, makeup smeared, maternity jeans she'd clearly just bought still creased from the store. Behind her, Derek lurked uncertainly, carrying what looked like takeout bags. "We brought lunch," Melissa said. "Can we come in?" I should have said no. Should have held the boundary, but curiosity won out. I wanted to see how this played out. Wanted to watch her make her move now that I knew it was coming. Fine. They entered my apartment, Melissa immediately heading for the couch like she owned the place. Derek set the food on my coffee table. Chinese, from that place on 3rd that I'd always liked. Calculated to please me, calculated to soften me up. "How are you feeling?" I asked, sitting in the armchair across from them. "Awful." Melissa picked at her nails. "Morning sickness is brutal, and we're so cramped in the studio I can barely breathe. Derek's stuff everywhere, my stuff everywhere, and soon we'll have a baby." She trailed off meaningfully. Here it came. "That sounds difficult," I said neutrally. "It is. It's so hard, Ava. And I know you're mad at me at all of us. but I need to talk to you about something. Go ahead. She glanced at Derek, who nodded encouragingly. They'd rehearsed this, probably practiced the whole script. We need more space, Melissa said. The baby's coming and the studio is too small. We've been looking at apartments, but everything in our budget is either too far out or in terrible neighborhoods, and I'm scared, Ava. I'm scared of raising a baby in some dangerous area where— What about Derek's job? I interrupted. Doesn't he make enough for a decent place? Derek flushed. The market's tough right now, and with Melissa needing to cut her hours at the salon because of the pregnancy, so get a second job. Silence. They stared at me. To what? Melissa's voice was small. If you need more money, get another job. Plenty of people work 2 jobs when they have a baby coming. I can't. The baby— You're only 3 months pregnant, Melissa. You can work. Derek can work. You can save money and find a place you can afford. But we can't. Her voice rose, tears starting. That's what I'm trying to tell you. We can't afford anything safe and decent, and Mom said— She said maybe you could help. There it was. Mom had put her up to this. Of course she had. Help how? I asked, even though I knew. Melissa took a shaky breath. Your apartment. It's so big for just one person, and you're never here anyway because you work so much. And we thought, maybe you could let us live here, just until we get on our feet? Derek and I in the bedroom. You could have the couch. Oh, or maybe you could stay with Mom and Dad and— No. The word hung in the air like a slap. What? No, this is my apartment. I bought it, I paid for it, and I'm not giving it up. I'm not asking you to give it up, Melissa was crying openly now, just to share it, just to help your sister in her time of need. Is that so much to ask? Yes, I said flatly. It is. Ava, please. Derek leaned forward. We're desperate here. We don't have family in the city, our parents can't help, and Melissa's pregnant. We just need a safe place for the baby. Then find one. This isn't it. Melissa was sobbing now, the full theatrical performance. I can't believe you. I can't believe you're being so selfish. Mom was right. You've changed. You've become this cold, heartless person who doesn't care about family. I care about family, I said quietly. I just don't think family means sacrificing everything I've worked for because you made choices you couldn't afford. Made choices. Her voice went shrill. You think I chose this? You think I plan to struggle? You chose to get pregnant. You chose to stay in a studio apartment. You chose to marry someone who can't support you. Those were your choices, Melissa, not mine. She stood up, shaking. Get out, Derek. Melissa, get out. I need to talk to my sister alone. Derek grabbed his jacket and left, shooting me a look that was half apologetic, half accusing. The door closed behind him, and Melissa rounded on me. What the fuck is wrong with you? She hissed. This was new. In the original timeline, she'd never dropped the sweet sister act, had never let me see the calculation underneath. But maybe my refusal had rattled her enough to show her real face. Nothing's wrong with me, I said. I'm just not playing this game anymore. Game? This isn't a game, Ava. I'm pregnant. I need help. And I'm telling you no, find another way. There is no other way. She paced my small living room, hands gesturing wildly. Don't you get it? We have nothing. No money, no space, no options. And you have this whole apartment just sitting here, and you won't even— It's my apartment. It's a piece of property. It's just walls and a roof. How can you care more about that than about your own family? Because my family, I said softly, has never cared about me. Not really. You see me as a resource, not a person. Something to be used when you need it, and ignored when you don't. Melissa stopped pacing. So, her face went through several expressions. Shock, denial, anger, calculation. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked how I was doing? When was the last time you cared about my life beyond what I could do for you? That's not fair. It's completely fair. You want my apartment, Melissa. You don't want me. If I died tomorrow, you'd grieve for a week and then start dividing up my stuff. She went pale. How can you say that? Because in another timeline, she'd literally walked away from my dying body. But I couldn't tell her that. Get out, I said instead. Take your husband and your takeout and your tears and leave. You're not getting this apartment. Not now, not ever. Mom's going to hear about this. I don't care. Tell her whatever you want. Melissa grabbed her purse, face blotchy with tears and rage. You're going to regret this, Ava. When you're old and alone and you realize you drove away everyone who ever loved you, you're going to regret it. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll still have my home. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the walls. I sat there in the sudden silence, heart pounding, hands shaking. I'd done it. I'd held the line. I'd said no and meant it and survived. The Chinese food sat on my coffee table getting cold. I stared at it for a long moment, then swept the whole thing into the trash. Mom called 10 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. Then Dad called. Then Melissa again. Then Mom again. I turned the phone off and went to take a shower, standing under the hot water until my skin turned red and the shaking finally stopped. I'd burned the bridge. There was no going back now. Good. Bridges were meant for two-way traffic, and my family had only ever used them to take. I toweled off, changed into pajamas, and opened my laptop. Time to plan the next phase. Time to figure out exactly how I was going to turn this small equity stake into total ownership of the building. Because if I was going to burn bridges anyway, I might as well burn them spectacularly. The building sale closed on September 12th, 2018. I watched from my apartment window as Marcus and Linda pulled up in a moving truck, unloading office supplies and furniture into the ground floor unit that Petrov had used as a management office. The old man himself was there too, handing over keys and paperwork. Looking relieved to be done with it all. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "We did it! You're officially a building co-owner. How does it feel?" I typed back, like I can finally breathe. It wasn't quite true. I wouldn't be able to breathe until I controlled more than 2.2% of the building, but it was a start. My apartment was now technically owned by the LLC, which I was a minority partner in. On paper, I'd taken a huge risk. In reality, I just ensured that Melissa could never take this place from me. The phone rang. Mom, again. I'd been declining her calls for 2 months now, and she'd escalated from guilt trips to threats to tearful voicemails. The latest message had been Dad, sounding tired and strained, begging me to just talk to your mother, please, Ava. Oh, she's making herself sick over this. I deleted it and went downstairs to meet my new business partners. The building looked the same from the outside, but felt different knowing I owned a piece of it. Every brick, every window, every inch of common space was partially mine now. The thought was dizzying. Marcus was in the management office surrounded by boxes, trying to set up a desk while simultaneously talking on his phone. Linda was already at a laptop, pulling up spreadsheets and renovation plans. They both looked exhausted and exhilarated. "Ava!" Marcus hung up his phone. "Perfect timing. We need to talk about the renovation schedule." For the next 3 hours, we went over plans. Which units to update first, which tenants to work with, how to phase the construction to minimize disruption. Linda had done a full analysis of the building's condition, and her findings matched what I remembered. Structurally sound but cosmetically dated, with some units needing serious work and others just minor updates. "We start with the vacant units," Linda said, pointing to her spreadsheet. "Get those renovated and rented at market rate to generate cash flow. Then we tackle the occupied units one by one, working with tenants to minimize displacement." "Unit 3A, I said. "The Rodriguez family. They're going to fall behind on rent in November and eventually get evicted. Don't invest too much in that renovation until you're sure they're leaving." Linda looked up sharply. "How do you know that?" "I know them. I know their patterns. Mr. Rodriguez gambles, and when football season starts, he always gets behind on bills." It was true in the first timeline, and I had no reason to think it would be different now. Linda made a note. "What about 6B? Marcus asked. "Mrs. Yamamoto. She's rent-stabilized, been here for 30 years. Is she going to be a problem?" "Not if you treat her right. She's stubborn but fair. Don't try to push her out and she won't fight the renovations." We went through the building unit by unit, and I provided details I shouldn't have known. Which pipes would burst, which electrical panels needed immediate replacement, which tenants would be allies, and which would be nightmares. Marcus and Linda took notes, occasionally exchanging glances that said they were impressed, but also slightly unnerved by my knowledge. "You really do know everything about this place," Marcus said finally. "I told you I did." "Yeah, but," he shook his head, "it's one thing to say it, another to see it. You're like a building psychic." If only he knew. We wrapped up around dinner time, and Marcus insisted on ordering pizza to celebrate. We ate surrounded by boxes and blueprints, talking about timelines and budgets and dreams. Linda wanted to flip the building in 5 years and walk away rich. Marcus wanted to build a portfolio of renovated properties. What did I want? Revenge, obviously, security, control, but beyond that? I want to own the whole building someday, I said. They both looked at me. The whole building? Linda repeated. Ava, that's a huge goal. I know. We're talking millions of dollars. Even if you save every penny, I'll find a way. Marcus smiled. I believe you. May, you've surprised me at every turn so far. Why stop now? We clinked our beer bottles together, and I felt something warm and unfamiliar in my chest. Partnership, camaraderie, people who saw me as capable instead of convenient. It was nice. It wouldn't last. I knew that. Eventually, I'd need to buy them out, and that would end this friendship. But for now, I let myself enjoy it. The development across the street broke ground in late September, exactly as I'd predicted. The announcement made local news, and overnight, property values in the area started rising. Marcus got 3 inquiries about buying the building in the first week alone, which he politely declined. Linda was practically vibrating with excitement. We could sell right now, she said at our weekly meeting. Probably get $10 million, maybe more. Oh, that's a clean $2 million profit. Or we could wait, Marcus said. Finish the renovations, get the units rented at market rate, and sell for even more in 2 years. Or we could hold it long term, I added. Keep it as a rental property and generate steady income. Linda shook her head. That's a lot of capital tied up. I'd rather flip and move to the next project. This was the fork in the road. In the original timeline, Linda had pushed for a quick sale and Marcus had convinced her to wait. The building had sold 3 years later for $18 million, making them both rich. But I didn't want them to sell. I wanted time to accumulate enough capital to buy them out. If we sell now, we lose the opportunity for real growth, I said. The development won't be finished for 2 years. That's when property values will peak. And if we renovate well, we could rent these units for triple what Petrov was getting. She's right, Marcus said. We'd be leaving money on the table. Linda sighed. I know, I'm just impatient. We've been working toward this for so long, and now that we finally have a win, I want to cash out. Give it 1 year, I suggested. Finish the renovations, get the units rented, build a track record, then reassess. If you still want to sell, we sell. And if you don't want to sell, Linda asked, looking at me, then I'll buy you out. She laughed. With what money? With whatever I can pull together. I'm serious, Linda. If you and Marcus want to cash out a year from now, give me first option to buy your shares. Marcus looked thoughtful. That's actually not a bad idea. Keeps it in the family, so to speak. It's insane, Linda said. Ava, you'd need to come up with at least $4 or $5 million to buy us out. How are you possibly going to... I'll figure it out. I would too. I had a year to save, to invest, to find the money somehow, and I had knowledge. I knew which stocks would spike, which investments would pay off, which opportunities would arise. Information was power, and I had more of it than anyone realized. Linda shook her head but didn't argue further. We agreed to the 1-year timeline and moved on to other business. I walked home that night feeling like I was juggling chainsaws. So many variables, so many things that could go wrong. But for the first time in my life, both lives, I felt like I was building something instead of just surviving. Melissa's baby was born in March. I found out from a Facebook post, well, not a phone call, a photo of her in a hospital bed, sweaty and exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny wrinkled infant. Derek beside her looking terrified. Caption, "Welcome to the world, Emma Grace. We already love you so much." I stared at the photo for a long time. My niece. In the original timeline, I'd been at the hospital for the birth, had held Emma first after the parents, had promised to be the best aunt ever, had meant it too. This time, I hadn't even known she'd gone into labor. The comments section was full of congratulations and heart emojis. Mom had posted, "Our beautiful granddaughter, a blessing to the family." Dad had shared the photo with proud grandpa. No mention of me anywhere. Like I didn't exist. Like I wasn't part of the family anymore. Maybe I wasn't. I closed Facebook and went back to work. I had bigger things to worry about than my sister's baby, like the fact that I'd just gotten a promotion. Sarah from accounting had quit unexpectedly, and Henderson needed someone who understood both the administrative side and the financial side. Someone organized, detail-oriented, trustworthy, someone like me. It comes with a raise, Mr. Henderson had said, and more responsibility. What do you say, Ava? I'd said yes before he finished the question. The new salary wasn't huge, $65,000 instead of $42,000, but it was enough to start saving serious money, enough to make a real dent in the million-dollar problem I'd set for myself. Between the new job and some careful stock investments, thank you, future knowledge, I'd managed to save $30,000 in 6 months. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was a start. I worked 12-hour days. Came home exhausted, fell into bed and dreamed of numbers and floor plans and the look on Melissa's face when I eventually told her I owned her building. Because I would own it. All of it. Every brick, every unit, every square inch. Including the apartment she'd tried to steal. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday. Not for me. I was an owner now. Untouchable. But for the Rodriguez family in 3A. Exactly as I'd predicted. 3 months behind on rent, no payment plan in place, no prospects of catching up. Marcus had tried to work with them, had offered extensions and reduced payments, but ultimately business was business. I watched from my window as they moved out, loading a rental truck with their furniture and belongings. Mrs. Rodriguez was crying. The kids looked confused. Mr. Rodriguez kept his head down, ashamed. I felt nothing. Though no sympathy, no guilt, no satisfaction, just cold observation. They'd failed to pay their rent, and now they faced consequences. That was how the world worked. The old Ava would have been horrified by this callousness. The new Ava recognized it as survival. Unit 3A was renovated over the next 6 weeks. New floors, new appliances, fresh paint. Marcus supervised the work himself. And the transformation was stunning. What had been a cramped, dated space became a bright, modern apartment that rented for $2,800 a month, nearly triple what the Rodriguez family had paid. Progress, Marcus called it. I called it justice. The building was changing, unit by unit. Marcus's vision was coming to life, and property values were skyrocketing just as I'd known they would. By the end of the year, the building would be worth at least $15 million. Which meant Marcus and Linda's shares would be worth $7.5 million each, which meant I was nowhere close to buying them out. I ran the numbers obsessively. Even with my new salary and my stock investments, I had maybe $100,000 in liquid assets. Nowhere near enough. I needed a miracle, or a massive windfall, or I needed Marcus and Linda to want out badly enough to give me a deal. The thought wouldn't leave me alone. What if something happened to make them desperate to sell? What if I could engineer a situation where they needed cash immediately, and I was the only buyer available? It was manipulative, unethical, exactly the kind of thing my family had done to me. But wasn't that the point? Wasn't I allowed to use their tactics against the world that had used me? I pushed the thought away. I wasn't there yet. Still had time to find another way. In May, Derek showed up at my door. He looked terrible. Thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that set my teeth on edge. He knocked 3 times, hesitant, like he wasn't sure I'd answer. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Derek. Ava, hi. Can we talk? About what? About Melissa. About the baby. About everything? I leaned against the doorframe. I have 5 minutes. He flinched but nodded. Okay, look, I know you and Melissa aren't talking. I know there's bad blood, but the baby, Emma, she's your niece, and Melissa really wants you to meet her. Does she? Yes, she talks about you all the time, about how she misses you, how she wishes you could work things out. Let me stop you there. I held up a hand. Melissa doesn't miss me. She misses what I could do for her, and I'm not interested in reconciling just so I can be a convenient babysitter. We don't want you to babysit. What do you want, Derek? He took a deep breath. We're struggling. The baby's expensive, and daycare costs more than Melissa makes at the salon, so she had to quit. We're living on my salary alone, and it's not enough. We're behind on rent, and our landlord is threatening to evict us, and you want money. A loan, just to tide us over until I can get a better job. Melissa's going back to work once Emma's older, and then we'll pay you back, I promise. No. Ava, please. No. You made your choices, Derek. You and Melissa decided to have a baby you couldn't afford, in an apartment you couldn't afford, with jobs that don't pay enough. Those are your problems. Oh, not mine. His face crumpled. We're desperate. If we get evicted, if we end up on the street, then I suggest you call your parents, or hers, or apply for assistance. There are resources available for people in your situation. But you're family. You're supposed to help family. I'm supposed to set myself on fire to keep you warm? I shook my head. No, Derek, I'm done with that. I'm done sacrificing for people who would never sacrifice for me. That's not true. Melissa loves you. Melissa loves what I can give her. There's a difference. I started to close the door, but he put his hand out, stopping it. Please, he said, and his voice broke. Please, Ava, I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything. I've applied for better jobs. I've picked up extra shifts. I've done everything I can think of, and it's still not enough. Oh, we're drowning, and I need help. Just this once. For a moment, I wavered. He looked genuinely desperate, genuinely scared. This wasn't manipulation, this was real fear. And no, I couldn't. Because I knew how this story ended. I'd loan them money and they'd never pay it back. I'd help with rent, and next month they'd need help again. I'd be the backup plan, the safety net, the one who fixed everything while they made no effort to fix themselves. I'd already lived that life. I wasn't living it again. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it, but I can't help you. I closed the door. Behind it, I heard Derek make a sound that might have been a sob. Heard him walk away, footsteps heavy on the stairs. I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door, wondering if I'd just failed some fundamental test of humanity. Then I turned around and went back to my spreadsheets. Summer brought the first real profits from the building. Marcus had finished renovating 5 units, all now rented at market rate. The cash flow was strong enough that he could start paying back the business loans and even distribute small profits to the partners. My share was modest, $3,000 for the quarter, but it felt enormous. Money I'd earned not from labor but from ownership, from being smart and strategic and willing to risk everything. This was how wealth was built, not through working harder but through owning things that made money while you slept. I deposited the check and felt like I'd crossed some invisible threshold. Linda was thrilled. "This is it," she said at our quarterly meeting. "This is proof of concept." We finished the remaining renovations. Get the building fully leased and then we sell. I'm thinking next spring. Property values should peak around then. Marcus nodded. Agreed. I've already had 3 more inquiries from developers wanting to buy. We're sitting on a gold mine. They both looked at me. I kept my face neutral. And your buyout offer? Linda asked. Still planning to come up with $4 million? I'm working on it. She smiled, not unkindly. Ava, I admire your ambition, but be realistic. Unless you win the lottery or rob a bank, you're not going to have that kind of money in 9 months. She was right. I knew she was right. But I also knew things she didn't. Knew which stocks would spike in the next 6 months. Knew which cryptocurrency would triple in value. Knew exactly where to put my money for maximum return. I'd been making investments carefully, quietly. Building my portfolio. I was up to $180,000 now. Nowhere near enough, but growing faster than a normal salary could explain. Marcus had noticed. You're doing well, he'd commented last month. New job must be paying you better than I thought. I've made some good investments, I'd said vaguely. He'd looked at me with that same unnerved expression he sometimes got. Like he couldn't quite figure me out. Like I was a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. Good. Let him wonder. Melissa's second eviction notice came in August. I shouldn't have known about it. We weren't speaking, and she certainly wasn't telling me about her life. But Derek's mother had friended me on Facebook months ago, and she posted everything. Literally everything. Praying for Derek and Melissa as they face housing challenges. God will provide. I clicked through to the comments. Other relatives offering thoughts and prayers, but no actual help. Melissa responding with crying emojis. Derek's father suggesting they move back to Ohio where rent was cheaper. They were going to be homeless. I closed Facebook and tried to feel something about it. Guilt, maybe. Satisfaction. Concern for Emma, who was innocent in all this. But all I felt was tired. Tired of the drama. Tired of the manipulation. Tired of being expected to fix problems that weren't mine to fix. They'd made their choices. Now they'd live with the consequences. Just like I'd had to. The call came in September. Not from Melissa. She was too proud for that. But from Mom. Her voice on the other end of the line was tight and brittle. Your sister is homeless. I said nothing. She has a baby, Ava? A 6-month-old baby. And she's living in her car because her own sister won't help her. She's not living in her car, I said calmly. She's staying with Derek's parents in Ohio. I saw it on Facebook. That's temporary. They can't stay there forever. And it's all because you and your selfishness. My selfishness. I almost laughed. Mom, I offered Melissa advice. I suggested she and Derek get jobs that could support their family. I suggested they live within their means. They chose not to listen. They're struggling. They need help. Then help them. You and Dad. You're her parents? We can't afford to. We're on a fixed income, and with your father's medical bills... She stopped. The silence was deafening. What medical bills? I asked quietly. Another pause, then, your father has cancer, stage 3. We found out last month. The world tilted. Stage 3. In the original timeline, it had been stage 4 by the time they found it. This was earlier. This was, maybe, treatable. Why didn't you tell me? My voice came out strangled. Why would we? You made it clear you don't care about this family anymore. Too busy with your new job and your new life to bother with us. The accusation hit like a physical blow, but underneath the hurt, I felt something else. Rage. I would have cared about Dad's health, I said, voice shaking. That's not the same as bankrolling Melissa's poor choices. They're both family. You can't pick and choose. Yes, I can. And I choose Dad. I'll help with his medical bills. I'll help however I can. But I'm not giving Melissa money. You can't just... Mom sputtered. Family doesn't work like that. Actually, well, it does. I'm allowed to have boundaries, Mom. I'm allowed to help the people who haven't spent years using me. You're being cruel. I'm being sane. I took a breath. When does Dad start treatment? Next week? Chemotherapy? The doctors say he has a good chance if he responds to the treatment. But the costs, our insurance doesn't cover everything, and I'll help. Send me the bills. She stopped, clearly thrown. You'll help? With Dad's medical care, yes. Not with Melissa's rent or her car payment or her credit cards. Just Dad. I don't understand you anymore, Mom said quietly. You used to be such a sweet girl. What happened to you? I died on a rainy street while my sister walked away, I thought. But what I said was, I grew up, Mom. I learned that being sweet just meant being used. I hung up before she could respond. Dad's cancer treatment became my new focus. I researched oncologists, treatment plans, clinical trials, sent money for bills, called the insurance company to fight denials, showed up at appointments to take notes. I did everything the old Ava would have done, but this time I did it with boundaries. I helped Dad. I did not help Melissa. When Mom tried to guilt me, if you can afford your father's medical bills, you can afford to help your sister, I shut it down immediately. Dad has cancer. Melissa has poor planning. These are not equivalent problems. When Melissa sent me a long, tearful email about how I was destroying the family, I deleted it without reading past the first paragraph. When Derek's mother passive-aggressively posted about family members who abandon pregnant women and babies, I unfollowed her. I built a wall around the people I chose to help and refused entry to everyone else. And slowly, impossibly, Dad started getting better. The chemotherapy worked. The tumors shrank. By October, the doctors were cautiously optimistic. He might beat this. He might actually survive. In the original timeline, he'd been dead by Christmas. This time, he'd probably lived to see Emma's first birthday. I sat with him after one of his treatments, watching him doze in the recliner, and felt something crack in my chest. This man had always been kind to me, had always tried to mediate, to keep peace, even when it meant enabling Mom's manipulations. He wasn't perfect, but he'd never deliberately hurt me. He deserved to be saved. Melissa didn't, and I was finally okay with that distinction. The building hit full occupancy in November. Every unit renovated, every apartment leased, a wait list of people wanting to move in. The transformation was complete, and it was stunning. Marcus had turned this old pre-war building into something special, modern but respectful of its history, updated but not soulless. The building was now worth $18 million, conservatively, which meant Marcus and Linda's shares were worth $8.7 million each, which meant I was still completely fucked on the buyout. I'd managed to save and invest my way to $400,000, a staggering amount for someone who'd been making $42,000 a year 18 months ago, but nowhere near the $8.7 million I needed. Even if Marcus and Linda gave me a massive discount, I'd still need millions more. I was out of time and out of options. Unless... The thought had been percolating for months, growing from a whisper to a shout. A terrible idea, an unethical idea, an idea that would make me exactly like the people I hated. But it would work. I pulled out my phone and called Linda. "Ava, what's up?" "I need to talk to you and Marcus. In person, tomorrow if possible." "Sure. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I just have a business proposal." We met at the building's management office, now a proper workspace with desks and computers and filing cabinets. Marcus was going through renovation receipts when I arrived. Linda was on her laptop, working on the books. "So," Linda said, closing her computer. "What's this about?" I took a breath. This was it, the point of no return. "I want to buy you both out. Now, before the spring sale." They exchanged glances. "Ava," Marcus said gently, "we've talked about this. You don't have the capital. I have a proposal." "Hear me out before you say no." Linda leaned back. "We're listening." "I'll give you each $500,000 now. Cash, immediate, for your full shares in the building." Silence. Then Linda laughed. Actually laughed. "Ava, our shares are worth almost $9 million each. You're offering 5% of that. Why would we possibly—" "Because I know something you don't." They both stared at me. "The development across the street is facing problems," I continued, my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. "Structural issues with the foundation. They're going to have to halt construction for at least a year, maybe more. Property values in this area are going to crash." This was a lie, a complete fabrication. The development was fine, on schedule, no problems. But they didn't know that. "How do you know this?" Marcus asked. "I have contacts at the city planning office, friends who work in construction. I've been hearing rumors for weeks." More lies. "Once this becomes public, and it will, probably in the next month, our building's value is going to drop by at least 30%, maybe more." "That's..." Linda pulled out her phone. "I haven't heard anything about this." "You won't. Not yet. They're keeping it quiet while they figure out how to fix it. But it's coming." I watched them process this, watched the doubt creep into their expressions. They'd trusted my information before, about the development, about the building, about everything. I'd been right every single time. Why wouldn't I be right about this? "Even if that's true," Marcus said slowly, "the building is still worth at least $12 million. 500,000 is immediate cash with no risk," I interrupted. "Think about it. If the development stalls, the building's value crashes. You'll be stuck with a property you can't sell for anywhere near what you hoped. You'll lose years of opportunity cost. But if you sell to me now, you walk away with a guaranteed $500,000 each. Clean, simple, done." "Or we could wait and see if you're right," Linda said. "If the development really is in trouble, we'll find out soon enough. By which time the news will be public and the value will have already dropped. You'll be trying to sell in a buyer's market instead of a seller's market." I leaned forward. "I'm offering you an out, a way to cash out at a decent price before everything goes to hell. Take it." I could see them wavering, could see the greed warring with the caution, the hope that I was wrong fighting with the fear that I was right. Marcus spoke first. "We need to verify this. Talk to our own contacts, do our own research. Do it. But I need an answer by the end of the week. After that, my offer expires." "Why the rush?" Linda asked suspiciously. "Because I have investors lined up who will only stay committed if we move fast. This window is closing." Another lie. I had no investors. I barely had the $500,000. But they didn't need to know that. I stood up. "Think about it. End of the week." I left them there, arguing in low voices, and walked back to my apartment on shaking legs. I just lied to my business partners, had manipulated them with false information, had done exactly what my family had done to me, twisted the truth to serve my own interests. The old Ava would have been horrified. The new Ava poured herself a drink and waited for them to call. Linda called on Thursday. "We'll take it," she said. $500,000 each, cash for our full shares. Marcus wants a clause in the contract that gives him first right of refusal if you ever sell, but otherwise, we're in. I closed my eyes. Deal. I'll have the lawyers draw up the paperwork. We can close next week if you can get the cash together that fast. I can. I hung up and stared at my apartment wall. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. I'd lied and manipulated and convinced them to sell their shares for a fraction of what they were worth. I'd bought a building worth $18 million for just over $1 million total. And I felt nothing. No triumph, no guilt, no satisfaction, just cold, hard pragmatism. I'd become the villain of my own story, but at least I'd won. The closing took 3 days. Lawyers, paperwork, bank transfers. I had to liquidate every investment I'd made, clean out my savings, even take a small personal loan to make up the difference. But when it was done, I owned 95.6% of 847 Fifth Avenue. The building was mine. Marcus and Linda walked away with their money, looking relieved. The development issues I'd warned them about never materialized, of course, but by the time they realized I'd lied, the contracts would be signed and irreversible. I stood in the management office, my office now, and looked at the building roster. 40 units, 8 floors, hundreds of thousands of dollars in monthly rental income. Mine. All of it. I scrolled through the tenant list, and there it was. Unit 3A, currently vacant after the Rodriguez family's eviction. Listed as available for rent at $2,800 per month. I pulled up the application list, and there, near the bottom, Derek and Melissa Chen. Application submitted 2 weeks ago. They didn't know I owned the building, didn't know that their rental application would cross my desk. They'd just seen a nice renovated apartment in a good neighborhood and thought they'd try their luck. I opened their application and read through it. Employment. Derek, retail management, $45,000 year. Melissa, currently unemployed. Credit score, 620. Borderline. References. Derek's parents, Melissa's former employer. Previous landlord, listed them as problematic tenants who left owing 2 months' rent. In any normal circumstance, this application would be rejected immediately. Bad credit, unstable income, poor rental history. No sane landlord would approve this. But I wasn't a normal landlord. I picked up the phone and called the number Derek had listed. Hello? Derek, this is Ava Chen. I'm the property manager for 847 Fifth Avenue. I'm calling about your rental application for Unit 3A. Silence. Then, Ava, I didn't know you worked there. I own the building, actually. Just completed the purchase. More silence. I could almost hear him processing this. So, our application, his voice was small, is approved. You can move in next week. First month's rent and security deposit due at signing. What? Are you serious? Completely serious. I'll have my assistant send you the lease paperwork tomorrow. Ava, I don't understand. After everything, why would you? I'm a businesswoman, Derek. You need an apartment. I have an apartment available. That's all this is. It wasn't. Though we both knew it wasn't. Does Melissa know? He asked. Not yet, but she will when you tell her. Congratulations on your new place. I hung up before he could respond. Then I pulled up the lease template and made some modifications. Standard 12-month lease, $2,800 per month rent, all the usual clauses. But I added something extra, a clause requiring 3 months' notice before termination and a penalty for breaking the lease early. I wanted them locked in. I wanted them dependent on me. And when they inevitably failed to pay rent, because they would, I knew they would, I wanted to be the one holding all the cards. They moved in on a cold Saturday in December. I watched from my window, 5 floors up, as they unloaded their meager belongings from a rental truck. Melissa looked exhausted, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt. Derek carried boxes while Emma fussed in her car seat. They looked broken, desperate, grateful for any scrap of mercy. My phone rang. Melissa. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened to the message. Ava, it's me. I don't know if you'll hear this, but thank you. Derek told me about the apartment, about you approving our application. I know we haven't talked in over a year. I know I said terrible things, but you didn't have to help us, and you did anyway, and I just... Thank you. Maybe we could talk sometime. I'd like you to meet Emma. I'd like to fix things between us, if that's possible. Anyway, thank you. Her voice cracked at the end. She was crying. I deleted the message. I didn't want reconciliation. Didn't want gratitude. I wanted them exactly where they were, dependent on my mercy, trapped in a lease they could barely afford, knowing that I held their housing in my hands. I wanted power, and I finally had it. They lasted 4 months. 4 months of scraping together rent. 4 months of Derek working doubles while Melissa tried and failed to find work that would cover daycare. 4 months of watching them struggle from my perch 5 floors above. I didn't enjoy it. That was the strange part. I thought I would feel satisfaction, vindication, justice, but mostly I felt empty. In March, Derek called. Not Melissa. She was too proud. But Derek. "We can't make rent this month," he said. His voice was flat, defeated. "I lost my job. Corporate restructuring. They let go half the management team." "I'm sorry to hear that." "I have interviews lined up. I'll find something. But right now, this month, we're short $1,200. I was hoping maybe we could work something out, a payment plan, or—" "The lease has a late fee clause," I said. $300 if rent is more than 5 days late." "I know. I read the lease. But Ava, please, we have a baby. If we get evicted, then I suggest you find the money." Silence. "You're really going to do this," he said quietly. "You're going to evict your own family." "You're not my family. You're my tenants. And tenants pay rent. You've become someone I don't recognize." "Good. The person you knew was a doormat. I like this version better." I hung up. The late payment came through on the 6th day with the penalty. They'd scraped it together somehow, but I knew. From experience, from history, from the certainty that came with having lived this before, that it was only temporary, they'd fall behind again, and again, until eventually they'd have nothing left, just like they'd left me with nothing in the timeline that didn't exist anymore. Dad went into remission in April. The doctors called it remarkable, miraculous, even. The cancer had responded better than anyone expected, and the scans were clean. He'd need monitoring, follow-up treatments, but for now, he'd beaten it. Mom called me crying. "He's going to be okay, Ava. Your father's going to be okay." I sat in my office, the real office I'd rented downtown for my growing property management business, and felt the news wash over me. I'd saved him. In this timeline, my father would live, would see his granddaughter grow up, would have years he'd been robbed of before. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like a question. If I could save him, why couldn't I save Melissa? The thought wouldn't leave me alone. I'd drawn this line between deserving and undeserving, between Dad who'd been kind and Melissa who'd been cruel. But the line was blurrier than I wanted to admit. Melissa hadn't always been terrible. I remembered moments, childhood moments, teenage moments, when she'd been a real sister, when she'd defended me against bullies, helped me with homework, stayed up late talking about boys and dreams and fears. When had that changed? When had she become someone who'd walk away from my dying body? Or had she always been that person, and I'd just been too naive to see it? The second late payment came in May. This time, they were short the full amount. No rent at all. Derek had found a new job, but wouldn't get his first paycheck for another 2 weeks. Melissa had picked up shifts at a nail salon, but it wasn't enough. Wouldn't ever be enough. I started the eviction process. The notice was delivered by a process server on a Tuesday afternoon. I watched from my apartment as Melissa opened the door, took the envelope, read the contents, watched her face crumple, watched her sink to the floor in the hallway, crying. Emma was playing nearby. She toddled over to her mother, patted her face with chubby hands, trying to comfort her. I closed the curtains. The eviction hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I didn't have to attend. My lawyer could handle it. But I went anyway. Sat in the back of the courtroom and watched Derek and Melissa present their case to the judge. They'd brought Emma. That was a calculated move, designed to generate sympathy. The baby was fussy, crying intermittently, and Melissa kept bouncing her while trying to explain their situation. Unexpected job loss, doing everything we can, just need more time. The judge looked tired. This was his 3rd eviction case of the day, and he'd probably heard the same story a dozen times already. "The landlord has a legal right to evict for non-payment of rent," he said, "unless you can demonstrate ability to pay the past due amount plus current rent within 30 days. "We can't," Derek admitted, "but we're trying. We're working as hard as we can. Please, Your Honor, we have a baby. If we get evicted, we have nowhere to go." That's unfortunate, but it's not a legal defense against eviction. The judge looked at the paperwork. "The landlord is—" He paused. "Sir Eviction, present," I said from the back of the room. Everyone turned. Melissa's face went white when she saw me. "You're the landlord?" The judge looked confused. I thought the family name. We're sisters, I said. Or we were. Doesn't change the fact that she owes me $8,400 in back rent. The judge's expression shifted to something I couldn't quite read. Distaste, maybe. Pity. Miss Chen, do you have anything to say before I issue my ruling? This was it. The moment I'd been working toward for 2 years. The moment where I got to evict Melissa, make her homeless, make her understand what she'd done to me. Revenge. Served cold and legal. I opened my mouth to say no, to let the eviction proceed, to finish what I'd started, and I saw Emma. The baby was looking at me with huge dark eyes, thumb in her mouth. I not understanding any of this, but sensing her mother's distress. She looked so much like Melissa at that age, so much like the sister I'd once loved. Your Honor, I said, and my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. I'd like to withdraw the eviction petition. The courtroom went silent. You... what? Melissa stood up, Derek grabbing her arm to steady her. I'm withdrawing the petition. We'll work out a payment plan privately? The judge looked relieved. Very well. Case dismissed. The gavel fell and I walked out before Melissa could reach me. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before Melissa found me. She knocked on the window and I rolled it down. Why? She asked. Just that. Why? I don't know. You had me. You could have evicted us, put us on the street, gotten your revenge. Why didn't you? I looked at her. Oh, it really looked. She was thinner than she'd been, older looking, worn down by stress and motherhood and poverty, but she was still my sister. Still the person who'd taught me to ride a bike and braided my hair before school and stayed up with me when I was scared of the dark. Because Emma doesn't deserve to be homeless, I said finally. Whatever you and I are to each other, she's innocent. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. Ava, I'm not forgiving you. I'm not forgetting what you did, what you would have done. I'm not suddenly okay with years of manipulation and guilt trips and taking advantage of my kindness. I held her gaze. But I'm also not going to make a baby suffer for her mother's mistakes. What happens now? You're going to set up a payment plan, something reasonable that you can actually afford. You're going to pay it every month on time, and you're going to stop expecting me to save you from consequences. I can do that. Can you? Because this is your last chance, Melissa. One more time. One more month of being late. One more crisis where you expect me to fix everything, and I won't hesitate. I'll evict you so fast your head will spin. Understand? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. And Ava, I'm sorry for everything. For taking you for granted, for being selfish, for all of it. I'm sorry. I wanted to believe her. Part of me, the part that remembered being sisters, wanted to accept the apology, to hug her, to fix everything between us. But I'd learned my lesson about trust. Prove it, I said. Prove you're sorry by doing better. By paying your rent on time, by not asking for favors. Sir, by treating me like a person instead of a resource. Words are cheap, Melissa. Show me with actions. She wiped her eyes. I will. I promise. We'll see. I rolled up the window and drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot. 2 years later, I stood on the roof of my building watching the city below. The development across the street was finally finished. Luxury condos and high-end retail, just as I'd known it would be. Property values had tripled. My building was worth $25 million now, conservatively. I owned it all. Every brick, every window, every inch. Melissa and Derek still lived in 3A. They'd never missed a payment after the courtroom confrontation. Derek had gotten a better job. Melissa had started her own small business doing nails from home. They were making it work, barely, but they were making it. We weren't close. Probably never would be. But we were civil. We saw each other in the hallways, exchanged pleasantries, acknowledged each other's existence. Emma was 3 now, bright and funny and completely unaware that her aunt had almost made her homeless. Dad was still in remission. Mom had finally stopped trying to manipulate me into fixing Melissa's problems. The family was functional. Dysfunctional, maybe, but in a way we could all live with. Marcus had started his own development company with the money I'd paid him. He'd called me 6 months after our deal closed, asking if I'd lied about the development problems. Yes, I'd admitted. There was a long pause. Then, that was brilliant. Ruthless, but brilliant. Are you angry? I should be, but honestly, I'm impressed. You played the game better than I did. We had no hard feelings. We still grabbed coffee sometimes, professional courtesy between former partners. Linda had invested her money in stocks and retired early. She sent me a Christmas card every year with no return address. And me. I was 27 years old and owned a $25 million building. I had more money than I'd ever imagined, more security than I'd thought possible. I'd won. So why did it feel so hollow? The rain started then, soft and persistent. I tilted my face up, let it hit my skin, tasted metal and memory. Remembered another rainy night in another timeline, bleeding out on pavement while my sister walked away. That Ava had died. This Ava had survived. But surviving wasn't the same as living. I pulled up my phone and did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I called Melissa. "Hello?" She sounded surprised. "It's me. Are you free for coffee tomorrow? I thought maybe we could talk. Really talk." A pause, then soft and hopeful. "I'd like that." "Good. I'll text you a place." I hung up and stood there in the rain, letting it wash over me. This wasn't forgiveness. Wasn't reconciliation. Wasn't fixing everything that had broken between us. But maybe it was a start. Maybe being willing to start was enough. The rain fell harder, drumming on the roof, running down my face. I didn't move, just stood there, alive and whole, and finally ready to figure out what came next. Life wasn't a revenge story, wasn't a simple narrative of victim and villain, justice and retribution. Life was complicated, messy, full of people who hurt each other and forgave each other and hurt each other again. And maybe that was okay. I took a deep breath, tasting rain and possibility, and went back inside. There was work to do, tenants to manage, buildings to run, coffee with my sister tomorrow. The future was unwritten. And this time, I was going to write it carefully. The office smelled like fresh paint and expensive coffee. I sat behind my desk in the corner suite of Chen Property Management, a company I'd built from one building into a portfolio of 12. $30 million in assets. 42 employees, featured in 3 business magazines as one of the city's rising young entrepreneurs. On my desk, a photo of Emma at her 8th birthday party, chocolate cake smeared across her face. She called me Aunt Ava now, said it naturally, like we'd never been anything but family. Next to it, a candid shot someone had taken at Dad's 70th birthday, him laughing, Mom beside him, Melissa in the background with Derek. Me on the end, smiling but separate, always separate. We'd never be what we were. The old bonds had broken too completely, but we'd built something new, fragile, honest, real. Melissa ran a successful salon now. Derek managed a retail district. They'd bought their apartment when I'd offered it to them at cost, a gesture that had surprised us both. They paid their mortgage on time. We had dinner once a month. It was enough. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Lunch next week? Have a deal you might be interested in." I smiled. We'd done 3 developments together in the past 2 years. He brought vision. I brought capital and killer instinct. We made a good team. Another text, this one from Tyler, the junior associate who'd helped me with my first partnership agreement. He was my in-house counsel now. Still curious, still asking questions about how I'd known things I shouldn't have. I never told him. Some secrets were better kept. The rain started outside, tapping against my windows. I watched the city blur and shimmer, thinking about timelines and choices and all the versions of myself that might have existed. The Ava who'd signed over her apartment and died on a rainy street. The Ava who'd ruthlessly evicted her family without mercy. The Ava who'd won everything and lost herself. And this Ava, the one who'd found some impossible middle ground between doormat and destroyer, who'd learned that power wasn't about crushing people, but about choosing when to help and when to walk away. I'd never be good. Not in the simple, uncomplicated way the old Ava had tried to be. I'd done things I wasn't proud of. Lied. Manipulated. Used people's trust against them. But I'd also saved my father, built a business, given my sister a chance even when she didn't deserve it. Maybe that was enough. Maybe being human meant living in the space between hero and villain, making choices that hurt and helped in equal measure. Trying to do better while acknowledging you'd done wrong. My assistant knocked on the door. "Miss Chen, your 2:00 is here. Send them in." I straightened my shoulders, turned from the window, and faced the future. The rain fell outside, steady and persistent, washing everything clean. And I was ready.